We're gonna get Norm on screen. Or... Oh, he's on. Okay. All right. Oh, I see you there, Norm.
Hey, Norm.
Perfect. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dave Whelan. I'm going to be moderating two panels today. So the second one will be Healthcare 2025, kind of talking about general trends in healthcare. So we are mixing it up by starting with the alternative healthcare funding. So this is kind of our alternative strategy. And really incredible panel here. Just really quickly on myself. I am a ecosystem builder in the healthcare space based in Los Angeles. My disclaimer is, yes, we are totally fine. I've been saying that 100 times over the past couple of days, but I am the chief business officer of Big 4 Bio, an organization that connects ecosystems across the country, venture consultant with Wavemaker 360 Health, and do a lot of consulting with non-US healthcare companies coming into the US market. And we've got a really awesome panel. We'll start with Norm, since he is virtual, and I'll try to call you out, Norm. But Norm Friedland, I'll have you introduce yourself in a second, and then we'll introduce the panelists here in the room. So Norm, just 2 or 3 minutes, if you could give us a quick overview of who you are and high level what you're doing, and then we'll dig into more details in a minute.
Sure. Thank you, David. Hello, Marty. Hello, panelists. Steve. Great to be here. So I'm co-founder of FullSky Partners. We are an impact.
Norm, 1 second. Can you wipe your screen? Because it's you're a bit foggy there. Your camera.
Like a psychedelic look or something.
Yes.
Really? Maybe that's what.
Okay, that's better. Yep, better. Okay, great.
Okay. So I'm a co-founder of FullSky Partners. We're an impact investment advisory firm, and one of our major focuses is on sourcing what we call mission capital, which is not ROI capital, for life science companies and life science organizations that have really important patient-centric deliverables, not only for the diseases, but where those solutions are made available equitably and affordably. And delighted to be here, and looking forward to listening to the other panelists and sharing some of our thoughts on the alternative use of mission capital for these solutions.
Awesome. Thank you, Norm. And I'm hoping next time we get you here in person. So looking forward to making that happen. To my left, Frank, again, please just tell us a little bit, who you are, what you're doing, and then we'll dive in more detail in a moment.
All right. So my name is Frank Alzaga-Chaudhry, a non-US resident, flew in from Copenhagen in Denmark. Been 20 years in the life sciences space, both in the advisory part of it, in the pharma part of it, and now in the biotech and funding part of it. The most novel thing that I've been working on in the last couple of years is how to make biotech investing attractive to both pharma, but certainly also to family offices, high net worth individuals, VCs, etc., that do not necessarily have access to it, but will be able to generate a return which is fast and highly attractive.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Next up, Steve Koeris with the awesome American Cancer Society bottle. So you know who he is. And Steve and I first met a few years ago in a much rainier JPM. So it's nice to see you on a sunny day.
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. So Steve Koeris, I lead new ventures at Bright Edge, which is American Cancer Society's impact venture fund. We invest on behalf of the American Cancer Society, so off-balance sheet dollars, if you will, philanthropically funded, so donor dollars in. We invest in early stage companies, seed series A typically, across the healthcare continuum, all with a focus on oncology. So we take the sort of mission priority areas of the American Cancer Society, distill those into investment theses, and look for impact investment opportunities in that space. About half of our portfolio is in therapeutics. We have a good chunk in diagnostics, and then a little bit in medical devices, health tech, et cetera. So anything that can really support a cancer patient from early detection and screening all the way through survivorship is on strategy for us. can talk a little bit as the panel keeps going about the way that we're funding both our companies as well as growing the evergreen structure of our fund through some new blended capital models that we're about to employ as well. By quick way of background, I trained as a cancer geneticist, and then have been on the biotech side for about a decade and a half, either within a small biotech company, worked within a family office doing direct investing on the family's behalf, big pharma with Eli Lilly, and then a more traditional venture capital fund, MPM Capital, for about 5 years, leading a seed fund in the oncology space, partnered with the Dana-Farber before coming over to American Cancer Society about 2.5 years ago. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And finally, Michael Koeris. And I met Michael, I think, 10 years ago in Boston, back when we were both doing work in the SynBio space. And then you've gone and done so much work in the non-dilutive funding space, and including this amazing new DARPA program, which you're going to tell us all about.
Yeah, so 10 years ago when I still had hair, that's how long ago. It's a pleasure to be here and tell you a little bit about DARPA. I'm not sure DARPA needs a lot of introduction, but I'll frame it in the context of biology and medicine, which we do operate on as part of our mission set for the warfighter, specifically the D in DARPA is the defense mission, right? So we're not ARPA-H. We're actually excited that ARPA-H exists because they took a lot of the cancer mission. They took a lot of diabetes, neuro, and other population-based efforts that need to be worked on, but that's just not our space anymore. So we're focusing squarely on the defense mission, which includes actually a broad portfolio of technologies that we're interested in working with. A lot of medical devices, actually, under the general umbrella and auspice of autonomy in medicine and autonomous medicine. I can speak more of that about what that means. The reason is that we're finding ourselves in a different conflict scenario likely than we used to be in the global war on terror, very asymmetric. And now if we're thinking about this regime that we're in, it's the great power competition. So back to something that resembles the Cold War a little bit more. So we have to contend with the fact that we have to probably operate in a military mission in a different way than we used to. And that means we need different technologies. DARPA, of course, on the BTO side, we invested in Moderna really early on, like first money in. And that gave us mRNA vaccines. Wasn't supposed to be, was actually infectious disease. So the infectious disease space is still a space that we're tracking. We're also aggressively tracking and re-emphasizing our traditional work in the CBW portfolio, chemical and biological warfare portfolio. Unfortunately, the reason is that, as we've heard from the prior panel, AI is a thing, and it does work. It does work really well for really cool things, and it does also work equally really well for really bad things. And the problem is, like, when technologies like that proliferate globally, then you may actually deal with a very large threat space that is difficult to deal with traditional approaches. So we're shifting our way in which we're trying to think about defense. And defense for us also in this case means, of course, the warfighter, but also means the homeland in this case. And it's not just actually centered on the human framework, but really also thinking about what does our agricultural supply chain look like? What does our protein supply chain look like? Because that's just as bad as if we were attacked. We do fund a lot from a size perspective. It's about a $500 million office annually. We have a program portfolio of about 60 programs. That's $2.25 billion at work, give or take. Our programs tend to be shorter now than it ever used to be because we just observe that science is moving much more rapidly, and I can't spend 5, 7, 8, 9 years for somebody to prosecute whatever they think is the right approach without actually constantly being connected to reality, right? So we've observed divergence from reality to what the actual program is. That's not good, right? So let's just go and correct by having shorter programs. Still the same amount of money, by the way, 25 to 100 for a program, which is a good chunk of change. And the question that we always ask to our performers, potentially you, can you work quickly enough? Can you actually consume that amount of capital and move forward with the appropriate alacrity? That's really what we're doing. Trained as a synthetic biologist, bioengineer in the Boston ecosystem. So know the folks from MPM well. Greg and I actually used to go running quite a bit. So now I run very slowly, but he still runs. And it is an important point that I wish I'd actually known more before. I am repeat offender on the entrepreneurial side, a couple of successes, a couple of failures. Never really worked with DARPA, consumed a small amount of capital from the SPIRs and the various other granting mechanisms that exist. But there is such a broad range in the federal government because it is a very, very large entity. The DoD alone is 2 million people, right? So it's $850 billion. Most of it not medical, obviously, but still also medical. So we do innovation, but then there's acquisition of blood, of devices, of therapeutics, and all that other stuff. So it's just a different pace usually to work with and a very different group of people that care about very different things. So I'm here to give you a little bit of an insight at that. Thanks for having me.
Folks, the audience online wants you to speak up a little louder or speak closer to your microphone.
Awesome, thank you. So just kind of sticking with you, Michael, as a starting point, and everyone's introduced a little bit about work they've done, I'll call it in the traditional investing space. And, you just mentioned kind of where you've raised capital from, for your startups in the past. And so before we dive into alternative funding, let's just talk a minute about, I'll call it the traditional funding. And so it's been a little while since you've done this, Michael, but, what works and maybe doesn't work about the traditional, call it, angel VC space, and then we'll get into how we're trying to get beyond that.
I don't think we have enough time for that question.
Go easy on it.
But let me give you a little bit of context. I also served as a partner in a fund for a couple of years before coming over to DARPA, so I've been on both sides of the table. The observation that I've had from the past is what I used to do in the past is probably not going to work anymore, like being reasonably well connected in the Boston ecosystem. You have a couple of friends, you get around together and you just kind of get going. Sounds trivial and was a little harder than that, but not a lot. But that was in the 2010s. So now the unfortunate reality is I think we need to be a lot further along in terms of an asset maturity stage from a therapeutic perspective, a lot higher TRL from a diagnostic perspective, from a device perspective, for commercially minded investors to take this seriously for the right reasons, because there's still enough risk on the reimbursement pathways, on the actual approval pathways, that the commercial investor, the private equity folks will take on. So where's the capital coming from? The capital is coming essentially a lot from the federal government, from philanthropic organizations, from potentially family offices, ultra high net worth individuals, right, that are motivated specifically for whatever disease state you're looking at, right? So essentially putting that funding chain together, I'm not sure that it includes a lot of seed capital early on for those not very well connected or not repeat successful entrepreneurs. So if you're a repeat successful entrepreneur, it's fine. People will throw money at you, but the vast majority of people are not. So first timers have a hard time, and I see not a lot of success in that way. So basically building a larger funnel of non-dilutive capital and or specifically motivated capital from the non-financial sector coming first. And I include the private equity folks, of course, in the financial sector.
Awesome. Steve, similar, and you've been on, I guess, both sides or all sides of that. So, a little bit about your background in the traditional space.
Yeah. So, I think to answer this question, Mike, I think you teed up a couple of things really nicely. Within American Cancer Society, we've given out $4 billion in grants over the history of ACS for academic research. There's about a few $100 million outstanding at any given time. That translation gap is real, right? The bench to bedside translation is still very hard, and there's a lot of first-time founders that have great ideas, and unless you know someone who's done it before, have that connectivity. If you're in Boston, if you're in San Francisco, maybe that's relatively easy to find someone at the lab next door or down the street that has a connection and can help you out there. Outside of some of those hubs, it's still very hard to kind of raise that capital and get the support and education that is required to move a company forward and really understand that the players in the ecosystem. So that's one of the reasons that we exist at Bright Edge within the American Cancer Society, is to help with that translation. Now we have sort of two functions of what we do here. Our more core investment activity that is more of a syndicated seed Series A focus when things are a little bit more established. But we've now built a portfolio of innovation programs to help first-time company founders, to help academic researchers that are looking to translate their findings into a new therapeutic, a new diagnostic. So I think that the connectivity that we can bring and the support that we can bring for those first-time founders, I think is really critical. I think the other piece that we see a lot of the traditional funding sort of fall flat is in areas that can be incredibly impactful for patients, but just haven't generated the same returns that, say, therapeutics have. Diagnostics, early detection, screening is a great example of that, right? We know we can save a lot more lives detecting cancer early than treating late-stage cancer with the next best therapeutic. And the funding environment for diagnostics is horrendous. Norm, I'm sure you're going to speak a little bit about this as well as you think about the mission funding that FullSky has been able to deploy and bring together. But this is a key need. So when we think about that the proof point that might be required to get more traditional funding to the table, having organizations that can bring great ideas forward to that point where they have just enough data now to get the more traditional funding environment excited, that's the type of thing that I think we need to see a little bit more of.
Excellent. And Frank, from your past, kind of what works and what doesn't work, which has led you down the path you're on now.
Yeah, good question. I think there are a couple of issues at hand that needs to be addressed. One is the perceived tie-up period that investors in the healthcare space believe there needs to be. One is the perceived risk and the real risk of investing in companies. Many biotechs are single asset focused or platform focused. If it doesn't work, and the technical risk would suggest that more often than not, it does not, that carries a real financial risk, image risk of you placing a bet with that company. So these risks needs to be managed in a different and novel way to make it attractive to investors. So what can you do? Well, you can look at institutional investors. They would typically not invest in you because your ticket size is simply too small. That diligence costs are exactly the same, regardless of the size of the investment. They have their processes, they have the regulatory requirements to adhere to. They will not go down that path. Then you can go the PE fund way. Well, if you do that, your money is tied up for a substantial period of time, typically 7+ years before you see a payout. What is left really to do? Well, look at the value inflection points along the way of any drug or medical device development pathway and cut it down to size to make that more attractive. Bundle your investments really rather than doing it asset by asset. Is my take.
Interesting. Okay, and we'll come back to that. And Norm, just to kind of wrap up this first part, you and I have spent a lot of time talking about, I think, what's broken about the traditional models, especially for first-time founders or for founders where they're looking for massive investment to get through clinical trials. And so, putting your hat on from the past, what have you seen that works there and then doesn't work, and then we'll segue into what you're working on.
Sure. So just to comment on the broken healthcare system in the United States, before yesterday I was talking to somebody.
We don't have enough time for that either, but no, keep going.
Well, yeah, this is short. He gave me an example. So I think CVS has spent $200 million on this AI prescription system. And so the fellow is supposed to get a prescription for erectile dysfunction, and he types it in and he goes to the pharmacist and they give him a bottle of pills, and he takes it home, and it's supposed to be taken before he has sex. But before he has sex, the phone rings and it's the pharmacist who says, "Oh my gosh, the system has given you cyanide, not erectile dysfunction pills." And he says, "Oh, thank you for telling me that." And the pharmacist said, "Well, the reason I told you that is Medicaid doesn't cover cyanide, so you owe us $300. That's our healthcare system. And my presentation is really directed to the family office, which has, as Michael alluded to, the motivation to fund disease solutions, because everyone knows that disease does not look at your FICO score. And so we're all one degree of separation from someone who we love, who we know, who's suffered horrendous diseases for which up until today there have been no solutions. Now, what you heard earlier today, what you're going to hear from Steve, what you're going to hear from Monique Malloy, who's in the audience from Gemma Bio, is that the developments that have occurred in the last 5 years seemed like science fiction 5 years ago. And what you're going to see in the next 5 years, we're going to make look what exists today, science fiction. Those solutions exist. The money is there. With the tsunami of wealth transfer that's going to occur from my generation to your generation, Steve, you're looking at $100 billion a year of philanthropic capital directed toward healthcare. And so for the wealth manager, for the tax advisor, for the legal advisor, here's an opportunity to get in front of that money and tell your clients how to deploy it impactfully. And that's what that's what FullSky does. We identify these opportunities, we package them with the due diligence, both in the science and the regulatory and the legal, and with the documentation, and we present them to these philanthropic funders, either the private foundations or the donor advised funds. And we can do this at scale because we're not going to one foundation or one individual family office, but via the wealth managers, we'll go to 100 family offices who are all interested in a pediatric cancer or an Alzheimer's or some other chronic disease. And through IRS-approved programs like program-related investments, we can collect $500,000 from 100 of these organizations, and now we have at-scale capital. So that's really what we're going to be doing in 2025. Two examples of that are Gemma Bio, which is the world's leading gene therapy company. Monique Beloy, I think, is in the audience, and I would encourage anybody to say hello to her.
She's back in the room.
In the
We're
back
waving.
Yep. And you know, as you know, as the speakers have all said, the only way we're going to unlock the ROI capital is with the mission capital, motivational capital that is really first loss, that takes the risk, so that the scientist, the entrepreneur can prove the concept, and that will unlock the ROI dollars.
Got it. And just sticking on that for a second, Norm, you know, you do talk about, you know, mission funding, return on mission. And so I think, you know, everyone on stage here has got, there's some overlap to mission, you know, with some distinctiveness, but from your end, you know, what are you building with FullSky in terms of what is the mission, or how do you define that mission for some of these partners you're working with?
Well, the mission is disease solutions, and it could be therapeutic. It could be medical devices like Innova. It could be diagnostics. And these solutions, have to reach the market, but they have to reach the market so that they're accessible and affordable to everyone. Because if only the 1% has access to these solutions, then the investment thesis we all ought to be looking for is pitchforks, because our society will not tolerate that kind of division between people who live and who die based on income.
Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, David, I love this question. I'll just expand a little bit on what Norm just said. So at American Cancer Society, as we think about deploying donor dollars for investment capital into for-profit companies, right, we need to make that argument to donors that this is on mission, and how do we prove that? As we think about, you know, well, first, why we do it, the ultimate product that these companies are going to deliver is what actually reaches a patient, right? A patient gets treated by a product, gets diagnosed by a product, right? Goes to the hospital, and a service business is supporting that their care. But we have to, you know, make that argument that these dollars are working just as hard as grant dollars that might be going to direct safety net support for patients that can't afford their treatment. So one of the things that we've done over the last couple of years is develop what we call our cancer impact investing framework. So using the framework of the impact frontiers, 5 dimensions of impact, we've sort of adopted a lot of the details of that framework, but put a specific spin on it with the mission priority areas of American Cancer Society, vetted from our, you know, network of experts, so evidence-based, expert vetted impact, and are really measuring that. So we have a whole program within what we're doing of impact measurement and management to make sure that the investments that we are making, both as we're diligencing them up front, we believe there will be return on patient-centric impact as the ACS defines it, as well as the financial returns, and then holding ourselves accountable as those companies are continuing to raise and doing, continual updates of that IMM framework to know that these companies are in fact hitting their impact goals as well as their scientific milestones and financial milestones as well. So it's sort of one additional layer that, we kind of take as mission investors as part of the American Cancer Society to really make sure that we are doing, the best that we can for our donors.
Awesome. And Michael, I think you were saying earlier that, once upon a time, DARPA's mission was to beat Sputnik. So how, we've maybe taken care of that in some way, but how has that evolved, especially on the biological side?
It's an interesting point. So the mission is still to anticipate strategic surprise and to create it, which always evolves, right? The mission set always evolves. Our threat landscape evolves. Our adversary spectrum evolves. So we have to contend with that. Nature also evolves. The planet evolves, and we're dealing with a variety of different sets here. So again, what we're thinking about now is, okay, what are some of the things that are really going to be dislocating us as a society, as a nation, significantly from how we're currently operating, how we're projecting power, and or just how we're operating as a society ourselves. There are quite a few things. I mean, we all went through this one thing, which we were surprised by, like COVID-19. That's not awesome, right? It's not what we're supposed to be. It's not what was supposed to happen, right? We were supposed to be a little better than that. Turns out we weren't. So it's not awesome. If you look at today, 2025, maybe close to the 5-year anniversary of the overall lockdowns here, are we really better prepared than we were back then? We're more aware. I would say that's fair. I don't think we're better prepared. So we're still pursuing what that is. What are these catastrophic things that come our way? And then there's also recognition that the DARPA can only do so many things with the amount of money that we're going to put into it. So we're always going to focus on technological solutions. Clearly, those are the things that we can do and we can scale. And I think what we need to do better, one of the missions that I have from leadership is we need to connect ourselves a lot better to the commercial space, because as I mentioned, at least in our space, the technologies that we develop on the military side must have a commercial civilian use case that is extremely useful and extremely lucrative, such that the company actually survives and goes from the initial inception and or the development of the capability into the civilian space where it is healthy and happy and prosperous and gets funded and eventually goes public, or at least provides a product and is sustainable such that we can acquire the capability that we actually originally wanted. So it's that ping-ponging back and forth between civilian and military applications that is more unique to DARPA BTO than to the rest of DARPA. If you build a hypersonics or if you build a satellite, like I know who's going to build those. That's an easy answer. But on the biological side, if we need synthetic blood, for example, it's entirely unclear who's going to do that for us. I know who needs it. It's the men in green and that need it, but I'm not sure who's going to make it for us. We have investments in that space, but that transition into the commercial space is really critical. So that's something that we're looking at. And again, we don't want to be surprised by the fact that we invested $100 million and the company decides, okay, well, can't raise capital. We're just going to shut it down and everything goes to hell. So that's something that we're working on.
Awesome. I also hope you're working on some fire mitigation technology somewhere in DARPA. So it's a side panel, but
it's a side panel. But actually,
you talk about we're not prepared better.
We're still not prepared, right? So let me double click on that for just 1 second, because it's analogous to a problem that we face on the medical side.
Yeah.
The lack of people, the lack of skilled people, the lack of, at least on the medical side, PAs, nurses, physicians. We don't have enough of them in the civilian sector. We absolutely don't have enough of them in the military sector. And if we ever get into a shooting war with somebody, we're going to have less of them. And they don't replace easily. They don't grow on trees. So the only thing that we think is really useful is to actually have autonomous devices or drones or some other capabilities that actually provide some of those skills. That is exactly analogous to the firefighting issues. Yeah. And we need to lean into that a little bit more. So I'm heartened by the fact we're also here in the heart of San Francisco, where I think robotic learning is taking a different shape. You're accelerating learning in a number of clever ways, right? There's a longer discussion we can certainly have, but that's something that we're absolutely focusing on. How can you learn quickly? What data sets do you need in order to learn? Is it a simulated data set? Is it multiple simulated data sets? Is it an amalgamation of data sets? Do we actually need to pay people to just train and then record and observe surgeons? Do we get it from other surgical robots like in my space? Okay. And then transfer it to autonomous platforms. That is a process that will work better and better. And I think we are going to lean into that entire stack of autonomy.
Awesome.
I just wanted to add that we've had DARPA present to our group in New York probably half a dozen times, and it's amazing the investments they made. And ARPA-H has also made an investment recently into two of the companies that I work with. Every Cure, there was a $50 million grant into EveryCure and also into Normal is the name of the other company that DARPA made.
Synalsense with
Synalsense,
with the
right.
ultrasound a cancer therapeutic.
Yep, fantastic. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And Frank, just on that, from your standpoint, are you building a mission framework with what you're constructing, or how do you think about this from a strategy standpoint?
Good question. So we're obviously mission driven as well as the rest of the gang here around the table. Our mission, though, is not dedicated to an individual disease, but cuts across disease areas and therapeutic areas. But the overall mission of us is to improve the lives of patients. And that we do in a meaningful way by deploying resources efficiently, much more efficiently than anything we see out there, with a shorter return on your financial investment as well. So we beat the market. I think it was Lorenzo that said that the lead time on investing in healthcare is plus 10 years. We can give you your money back in 5. We heard earlier today that the Sharpe ratio of 3 is beating everything out there. Our Sharpe ratio is closer to 4. So if you wanna do something meaningful, come play with us.
Got it. So that's actually a great segue as we think about there's 2 major audiences here. We have the family office investors, and then we have a lot of founders, entrepreneurs in the audience. And so sticking with you on that, Frank, you just presented a couple of call them competitive stats, if you will. So what is your pitch to LPs or investors in what you're doing?
Yeah, good question again. So we do 3 things. One is to take the risk out of biotech investment. We do so by investing or building a portfolio of assets. We do so by scale. We leverage scale of investments, and thus eliminating risk of investing in single companies built around a single technology or platform. Thus we spread risk across multiple shots on goal. We also do it differently than typical PE or VC money does. We do so by investing in a specific asset. So a science-based approach. We do not carry the burden, inverted commas here, the burden of the cost of management or parallel clinical trials. We carve out what we're interested in and what we believe in from a scientific perspective and from a commercial perspective. We need to believe that it has the potential to actually make it to market, to make it through the approval needle's eye with the FDA here in the US, certainly also in EMA and other regulatory approval bodies around the world, to make a difference to patients. We do so also by infusing development capabilities into the equation, helping biotech founders with what they typically lack, namely drug development capabilities. They have an idea. They're typically always really innovative, but they really lack the insight of what any agents down the road would require from them in order to take ownership of it. So remember, pharma companies around the world, they insourced just 10 years ago 50% of their in-market therapies. Now that's closer to 60%, and it's still growing. So that's important to recognize your own place in that ecosystem as a biotech entrepreneur, that you will likely not see the success of your idea all the way through. So you need to hand it over. You need to hand it over in a convincing and an attractive way, so that it actually gets funding and gets tried along the way, and will get to market. Right? And the last thing I would argue is that that our value proposition is, again, superior financial returns compared to PEs and VCs. Our return profile is indeed substantially higher and faster.
Interesting. And Steve on Steve on that front is BrightEdge is a relatively new initiative. Is this dollars coming from the traditional American Cancer Society donor? Is there a split strategy where you're getting both charitable dollars as well as investment dollars into the program?
Yeah. So BrightEdge was founded in 2019 with an allocation of ACS's investment pool. So as a large public charity, we don't have an endowment at ACS, but we do have our sort of rainy day account, if you will, which we did need over the pandemic because walks and galas and golf tournaments didn't work so well in 2020 and 2021 for fundraising. So we were started in 2019. Like other foundations that have deployed a venture philanthropy strategy, we're also taking directed donations into the fund today. So that has sort of grown our fund to what we are about $80 million under management at this point in time. We've made 22 investments out of that portfolio, have had 7 exits over those past 5 years, net positive across that entire portfolio. In order to scale, the idea of sort of blended capital is one that we are in the process of designing and deploying. As we know, there's great opportunities to continue to build on the philanthropic side. But Norm already, mentioned the ideas of PRIs. One thing that we've looked at are recoverable grants. These do have both the benefit of a charitable contribution. From a tax perspective, they can have returns on the back end if the ultimate investments are successful. So they're an interesting sort of blended model. We actually had a write-up done on some of the work that we're doing there by an organization called CapShift, which is one of the leading platforms sort of in the recoverable grant space. So that's a really interesting model to kind of blend capital so that we can continue to scale those operations. So stay tuned on some of those interesting opportunities as we continue to build them. We also sort of offer up some of our companies for just direct co-invest from some of our larger donors because they're certainly interested in that. Frank, to expand just a little bit on your point, I think some of the opportunities for really capital efficient deployment on key milestones that really get you to those critical go no-go decisions, looking at sort of the traditional venture model, right? $60, $70, $80 million Series A raise with this incredibly impressive management team that is all taking incredibly large salaries into those companies, right? And developing a platform where at the end of the day, by the time you actually have a product in the clinic, the value of that company gets boiled down to that lead asset, right? That is ultimately where that sort of happens. Yes, there's platform value and great non-dilutive deals that can be done with pharma partnerships and other things, et cetera. But at that earliest stage of really understanding, does this technology have legs? Really being capital efficient and driving to those key decision point milestones is where we see a lot of founders, take some significant missteps. So the more that can be done to kind of bring that knowledge to bear so that you are really spending the capital on the most important experiments to understand, should we continue to spend capital in this area is really where you're going to make some significant progress, right? And move that needle. So love that, that model and the way you described that.
Stephen, just to add on to that. Sorry.
I'm sorry. And Steve, that's where the mission capital comes in, because that's first loss, high risk. It's coming in from a foundation where the money's already sitting in that bank account. It's coming from the DAP where the money is already there. Nobody's writing a check. They've already deployed the capital, and now you've given them an opportunity to deploy it much more impactfully, which, if it's deployed correctly to the right solution, now unlocks the ROI capital that Frank is supporting.
Yeah, and Steve, just to add to what you said, what we do is somewhat different than writing or cutting a large check and seeing hoping that it works at the end of a development phase. What we do is actually agree on milestones along the development phases in the plural, and have the optionality to actually stop midstream, so to speak, and redeploy capital if it doesn't meet the thresholds that we agree upfront.
Yeah.
And that optionality makes our model less risky and has more upside, obviously, because we can get more shots on goal with the way we deploy our resources.
I'd like to jump in.
Sorry about that. I had a question, but finish what you were saying, Mark.
Sorry, I wanted to jump in here on what Frank's saying and see what you've also been saying about capital efficiency, which is a critical consideration. And I, as a former entrepreneur, also massively at fault for doing things in a most capital inefficient way by rebuilding what really should not have been rebuilt. Why? Vanity and lack of knowledge, like lots of different things, right? But that is actually not limited to the private sector. That also totally happens now at DARPA. It's like, no way, this is happening here as well. So we need to do a lot better as an industry to reduce the actual capital spend on the non-value creating experiments. And it's not always easy to know what is really value creating, what's not. But there's a large set in the center of the massively overlapping Venn diagram of experiments you need to know. You need to do talks, you need to do like all the dosing and all this. And no, you should not be doing this yourself. You should give it to somebody who's done it before, either at a large pharma or at a really big CDMO. And maybe you shouldn't hire like these 15 other people and try to reinvent the wheel, because you're probably going to do it a lot worse. So that's a really interesting point about hypocrisy and maybe naivety about the entrepreneurial and also the folks that work with us, because a lot of them are from the pre-stage on the academic side, and we see, no, we're going to start a company, we're going to be the next Pfizer. And it's like, you're absolutely not. Best case, you're licensing to Pfizer, and everybody should be happy, because then we actually might get a drug. Right. But that's what people lose sight of often.
That's a really important distinction. But I had a question for Steve. Steve, can you dive down into the structure of the fund that you run? Are you guys the only part of the general partner, American Cancer Society? And how do you reconcile all that? And what are the follow-on rights in terms of the whatever you're investing in early stage, succeed, and what are the follow-on rights for LPs, et cetera, or co-investment opportunities, things like that?
Yeah, so we're all philanthropically funded. So the money that comes in are donations to the 501c3 American Cancer Society. We manage that on behalf of ACS. So Bright Edge is a wholly owned subsidiary LLC of American Cancer Society. So I work for American Cancer Society. That's who pays my paycheck. Our job is to grow that pool of capital and make it evergreen for ACS. Donors into the fund that have made restricted donations to help us continue to grow above a certain size do have sort of access to the things that we're doing. We share some of the updates of the deals that we're seeing on a quarterly basis. We call this our founder circle. They're sort of our inner circle that is helping us continue to grow, and we kind of give them a front seat at everything that we're doing. So we have enabled some co-invest opportunities through that. As we continue to build some of our earliest stage investing, we see more opportunities for that in the future. Seed and Series A is where most of our investment focus is. I mentioned those innovation programs. For them, we're in many cases kind of writing $100,000 safe note into a company. It could be the first money into a company, kind of going through our educational and accelerator program to support those projects. There we think we're kind of both training people in some instances, projects in other instances, and in a new accelerator program that we're about to build is really shining a light on some of the biggest problems in healthcare, especially care disparities that we're seeing, and some of the social drivers of health that, as our former CEO would say, as much as the moonshots of new therapeutics are important, the ground shots of actually just getting patients to standard of care is also really important. So that's another angle of what we're investing in.
So, and do you guys take warrants on when you guys make grants? Are you taking warrants or anything like that? Or
so from our granting portfolio, there's no strings attached. We haven't changed anything in that regard. When we make an investment, we're making an equity investment on the cap table, just as any other equity investor would be making. And we have, typically our pro rata rights. So we'll make our follow-on investments and follow it through the life of the company.
And are your attorneys on the philanthropy side the same as on the fund side, or different attorneys, or who are the vendors in terms of the fund?
Yeah. So we have both internal counsel at ACS that has experience on all the nonprofit. We have fund counsel, although again, we're more of we're a balance sheet investor, if you will, for ACS. So I call it a fund because it's a pool of capital, but it's not a fund in the traditional sense. We don't have LPs, we just have ACS. And then, with some of the companies that we're working with, we have, counsel that we work with more directly if we're, helping a company write a term sheet or supporting a founder with some of the corporate diligence or something like that. So.
Got it. Okay, perfect.
And actually, just not to pick on you, Steve, but one follow on there as I think about this. So it sounds like with Series A, you potentially build SPVs where you allow some of your larger donors to come in, or is that a step too far?
So you're reading the future playbook potentially there. So not to get into all the weeds, and I'm not the person to talk about it, but right now, given the size of ACS and given our investment size, we're not a huge concern for unrelated taxable business income. For ACS, we can, as we continue to grow, become problematic in that regard for a nonprofit. So right now, we're just enabling direct co-investments. We're making the introductions. Individuals in the company need to kind of make those determinations themselves. We could think of multiple vehicles and things like SPVs that would enable us to kind of stay in that loop, but gotta walk before we crawl before we run.
Awesome.
I'm going to say that when you guys were first launching the fund, we had a couple of speakers from American Cancer Society come out and talk about it. So it's interesting to see how it's grown so much. I think what's the size of it right now?
About $80 million.
Perfect.
So,
Michael, just a quick question. I would love to hear what was DARPA's pitch to you, and what was your pitch to them? Short, but I'm just very curious.
It was interesting. So I've never worked with DARPA or for DARPA before. Wasn't the performer, wasn't the program manager or anything else. So a little bit of a rando that they got to, because I did some work in the defense space, which is important
Your
because
reputation precedes you, though. Come on.
right, but the importance of renewing yourself at DARPA is actually really critical. So nobody gets to stay longer than really 4 years in a role. So they're going to kick me out in 3 years and 4 months, give or take, no matter how well I do. Right? If I don't do well, then they're going to kick me out earlier. That's pretty sure. But the pitch is actually pretty simple. We are one of the premier defense innovation entities in the world and one of the leading technological innovation entities in the world. We have an enormously broad reach. We've innovated with friends some of the seminal technologies of at least the last century and potentially also this century. And the request was to please make us go faster. I was like, yeah, I'll do that, because we observe this, as I mentioned earlier, everything's moving faster. There seems to be a constant acceleration that we're under, and we need to react to it. We need to harness it, in my opinion, because we do have, I think, a fundamental ability to really change the fabric of reality a little bit with the biological technologies that we're observing and that we're working on in the healthcare space, in the agricultural space, and the global ecological space. And that's exciting to be a part of. My pitch to DARPA was like, can I please go and change the team to be a little bit more commercially minded, because we have not done that in the past. There was a lot of, hey, this is going to be given from one government agency and entity to another, for like more funding, and never actually transition a capability into commercially stable form. And that's the only form that is really stable, because the government can change its mind on a dime. Like you're just like, yeah, we turn the money off, right? I can do that. Congress can and does do that. And that doesn't really make for a robust capability for the national defense. So that's not something that we've done historically. And the need is greater on the bio side than ever before. I've talked to a few provosts of universities, and out of, let's say, 6 inventions from tech transfer offices that make money, 4 of them are bio, for obvious reasons, mostly therapeutics. I'm like, yeah, okay, so let's understand the reality of where we are, and let's actually contribute to that. So.
Excellent, thank you. So we got just a couple more minutes here, and really want to understand how the audience here in the room and online can help. And so, Frank, kind of what's your biggest ask, whether it's on the investor side or the investment side, or both?
So 2 asks really. If you have an idea for a new therapeutic, write me an email. That would be fantastic to hear. We are always on the lookout for new innovative, groundbreaking ideas.
Therapeutic
Ideas, yeah, exactly. So no medtech type of thing. No ones and zeros either yet. Maybe in the future. In addition, any funds available would be efficiently deployed with an attractive return. So really both ends of of the circle, so to speak. And in a couple of years from now, anyone interested in buying one of these assets, please do reach out already now.
Excellent. Bonus ask. All right. Steve, besides buying address labels to say American Cancer Society, what can we do to help?
Yeah, I think, similar to Frank, if you are working with a company in the oncology space that's early and you think might be a fit for our investment thesis, would be happy to take the introduction. I think, I alluded to some of the blended finance models that we are looking to employ in the not too distant future here. I think the ask there would simply be some learnings, right, across a family office that has both interest in the philanthropic space, but also, right, for-profit investing as well, understanding where you've seen new types of vehicles being deployed and new blended capital structures. We've definitely seen some. We have some great ideas of what we're going to build there, but more advice from those that would actually be interested in participating is certainly something that we're seeking.
Awesome. Michael.
For us, I think it's twofold. Number one, if you have ideas, so certainly not just therapeutics, but also therapeutics. Cancer is actually not really our mission set, but we do care a lot about infectious disease. We do care a lot about medical devices. We care a lot about data, as it turns out. So if you have ideas that are centering around the generation of data at a rate that is outrageously not even thinkable right now, then that's something that I'm interested in. In general, I'm interested in things that are not really possible, and then we can work on making them possible. From the financial side, from the partner side, if you will, I encourage everybody to reach out because we do want to build a broader ecosystem. We do want to build an awareness of our portfolio and certainly of our thinking, as well as an awareness in our performer community with who could be the follow-on investors and eventual partners in commercializing these technologies, because that's something that we've not done well in the past. So that's where we want to lean in.
Perfect. And Norm, to wrap it up, how can others help? What are you looking for?
So again, our story is to the owners of the philanthropic assets who want to understand how those assets can be deployed with leverage, with efficiency, with impact. And in the specific case of what Michael and DARPA is doing, there is a way of funding some of these projects that make sense through investing in something called priority review vouchers, which come out of the companies that DARPA is supporting. And that's both a mission possibility, mission funding possibility, but also an ROI investing possibility. And we're working with Andrew Lowe at the MIT Laboratory for Financial Engineering on that. But again, for the philanthropic asset owner, for the advisor, there's really a tremendous need for your thinking, for your energy, for your creativity to work with Steve, to work with Frank, and to work with companies like Gemma to really take these solutions and deliver them to the patients with accessibly and affordably.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Norm, and look forward to seeing you in person next time. Thank you, panelists. This has been great. And we're going to turn it over to Marty and we'll keep going.
Great job, guys.